and technical educators. My name is Pam Batchelor, and I'm from the Department of Public Instruction on the Digital Teaching and Learning team. And I am excited to create this tutorial specifically for CTE teachers on how to create a test in Schoolnet. So if you will sit back and relax and watch my screen, I'm going to walk you through the easiest way for you to find and then create a test with your specific CTE items that were loaded by NCDPI from your consultants at the state level. Alright, so first we're going to get started by logging into Schoolnet. You'll find Schoolnet as the red house icon on your NC EdCloud tray. So once you've loaded your Schoolnet homepage, you'll notice the navigation menus over here on the left. So in this particular view, the navigation menu stays minimized with just icons, but if I click on the three dots in the top left corner, that makes my navigation stay, and I also have a larger menu bar. I prefer that view, but it's up to you. If you're on a smaller screen, you might prefer to have your navigation minimized. Alright, so first we're going to go under Assessments, and first I want to show you where your CTE items specifically are. So last year, Schoolnet got an upgrade, and all of our items are now organized into item banks. So that makes it super easy to find items specifically to what you're looking for. So under Assessments, I'm just going to go down here to where it says Item Banks, and then you can see like a little briefcase icon. Now keep in mind, this video that I'm filming, we are on the training site. So all of this data that you're going to see, you may see some extra item banks that are just for the training site, but you will see your list of item banks when you click on item banks in your production instance. Alright, so if I go through this list of item banks, they are in alphabetical order. You will notice that we have our Certica bank with Spanish items. And then we have, if you scroll on down, we have some CTE banks, right? So we have a CTE middle school bank that has items for middle school. And then we have an unsecured bank, and that's for our high school CTE items. Notice over here that there's these check boxes. Search this bank when building tests, right? So by default, when we go to build a test in Schoolnet, we can set up which item banks we want Schoolnet to be looking at. So if you know, for example, that you are only going to be interested in using the NCDPI CTE items, you can go in here and uncheck every other item bank. Right? And so that way, when you are searching for items, you're only going to be seeing those CTE items. So if that's something that's interesting to you, I recommend you doing that. Otherwise, you can leave them all checked, and then we can filter them out by looking at your CTE standards, which is what we're going to do next. All right. So I've showed you how to find your items, and of course, if you wanted to look at them, you just click on the items and it will start to load. So here are the 1,300 items for middle school. All right, I'm going to go ahead and X out of there, and let's go ahead and find items and build a test. All right, so we're going to go back under Assessments, and we're going to go under Items, Rubrics, and Passages, and we're going to click on Find Items. I always like to find my items first and then build my test. So this is a little bit different method. If you've been used to using Schoolnet, you might have been used to Express Test or create a manual test. I really encourage you to try my way and just see if it fits your way better. I will say that Express Test is an express way to get errors. So our Express Test has some automatic settings that for career and technical educators, you have to know that the settings are there and where to change them in order to apply the best settings for a career and technical education test. So I will say to either use the under Create and go to a manual test, or try my way of finding your items first and then build a test from there. So we're going to go under Items, Rubrics, and Passages, and we're going to go to Find, and we're going to go to Items. And so if you've been using Schoolnet for a long time, this may be a little bit different than what you're used to, but I encourage you to try it and see if it's a more efficient way for you. All right, so we're going to go in here And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for standards, okay? And I'm going to go in here, and also, since we're in the training site, it picks up your grade level in Schoolnet and your subject area. I'm just going to go in and uncheck all of those because I want to see as many items as possible, and then I'm going to filter it down using our standards. So I'm just going to, and you can also click on the clear all filters, which clears everything out. All right, so now I see the most number of items. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna say select standards. All right, so we are gonna go in here, and once we've done our standards, we're gonna go in and select our subject area. So of course, career and technical education. We're going to check our grade levels. So if I'm a high school teacher, I'm gonna go ahead and put in 9th through 12th. And then you'll see your program areas start to load. And so if we click on the arrow next to them, we will see our specific courses. So I'm going to go ahead and add. You can use that plus button next to a course to go ahead and add all of the standards for Agriculture and Mechanics 1, right? So I want to, that's what I'm teaching. I want to see all of the items for that course. So I'm going to click Save and Close. And now I just see the 262 items that are specific to my course. And I can go in here and I can continue to filter out specific standards if I wanted to continue to narrow that down. So we're going to go through and simply look at the items, and every item I want to put on a test, I'm going to click this checkbox. And you'll notice that down here at the bottom of my screen, it's building like a shopping cart. So this is how I prefer to create tests, right? So we're going to go through. And I've got these 5 items. You would, of course, continue checking your items. I'm going to go ahead and under Item Actions, I'm going to say Add to a Test. Okay, so this is where we get into the building of the test process, right, with those 5 items identified. So I'm going to say create a new test with these items. And just one note, if your program area is one of the ones that underwent a standards change and you have new items for this coming year, for 2021, please do not make a copy of a prior assessment that has old items from last year. With CTE, when your standards change and are updated, you receive new items. So we want to make sure it's going to cause a lot of errors in the system if you make a copy of an old test with items that no longer exist. Because what happens is we retire those items and we delete them out of the system, but they're still going to live in your prior tests. So if you went and made a copy of one of those old tests, it's going to create a whole bunch of errors in the system. So always create a new test when you have new standards and new items available. All right, so we're going to call this our CTE sample test. We're going to make sure our subject area says Agriculture, 9 through 12. And then our preferred standards document, you're going to want to make sure that this matches career and technical education. So under the subject area, you can probably find one that's related to your program area, but you're going to want to make sure that that standards document is career and technical education. All right, and so all of these default settings you can leave. I will say under the test settings and test item defaults, you can look at these, enable tools and manipulatives. Under test settings, I do like to allow students to comment on each item in case they have a question about something. And then right here under, this is really important, under test settings, accommodations, this is where you can enable accommodations for your students who need it, right? So I'm going to check all these boxes because I want to make sure that if a student in my class has a modification on our IEP that says they read aloud, I'm going to make sure they have text-to-speech. All right, so this is a 2-part process, right, for accommodations. I have to enable it on my test as a teacher, and then the student has to have it marked in their profile in Schoolnet. All right, so I'm going to go through and generate the test, and it can take a minute, especially if you've selected a lot of items in your shopping cart. So if you did go up to that upper number of 100 that I recommend, it might take a minute to generate the test. Since I only chose 5 items, it was really quick. So you can go into your items, you can make changes to them if you want. If you forgot an item, maybe I want to go back and add a few more, you can go right here to where it says add item and you say from item bank, and that brings up that box again with finding items, and you can go through your standards again to select your course and add more items. Okay, so I've gone ahead and looked at all of these items. You can drag and drop to reorder them. So let's say I wanted number 2 to become number 1. You can drag and drop. And then when I'm all done with my test edits, I can say return to test details. And that'll save my changes. And now we're in our testing stages, right? So we got to go through from our private draft to a ready to schedule to our schedule, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click on that ready to schedule. And click on schedule. Now from this point forward, I can't make any changes to the content of the test without having to go back and change the scheduled settings as well. Okay, so our start date, our first date that we want students to be able to take this test. There's some test results and scoring here. So if we want the students, we don't want them to accessing the test results until after the end date. So maybe I, don't want them to see this until the end date of the test, so that way they can't see their score. You'll also have another box right here, or 2 boxes actually, since I'm in the training site. One that says allow to link to a Canvas course, and then another button that says gradebook passback. All right, so we do have it able to be linked to your Canvas course if you're using Canvas to teach from, but a really important thing is that you do not check the send a gradebook if you're going to be using this test in Canvas, because tests in Canvas, the grades will actually come from Canvas and not from Schoolnet, so it won't let you link a test if you've got it set to send a gradebook in your Canvas course. So just a note about that, but if you're just going to have students in Schoolnet, you can feel free to check that box and it will allow the grades to go right to your gradebook. All right, so a really important step is that you assign the test to your students. This is probably one of the number 1 things we get a service ticket about, is because if you don't assign the test and you just let students take it, like you just give them the passcode, then your reporting isn't going to show up correctly, because you're going to have students that maybe are in your classes will get mixed up if you have multiple sections that are taking the same test. So always want to make sure you assign your test, right? So you're going to go in here, there's a quick assignment which will be all of your sections, and then you can go in and edit to just select the sections that should be taking this test. There's an online test passcode. You can change that so it's not gibberish. I recommend using some type of naming convention, whether it's your last name and the year and a number, or something similar to that. Help make it easy for students to log in. Also, if you're going to be linking the test to Canvas, you need the test passcode, so go ahead and copy it, because that's how you're going to link it in Canvas. We do have a secure tester application for Schoolnet. However, you need to work with your technology services department to make sure that secure tester is installed on every single device that the students will use to take a test, right? So with this current remote situation, I wouldn't recommend secure tester unless you're absolutely sure that every student's device has that secure tester application installed. So there's an app for Chromebooks, and then for laptops and desktops, it's an actual push install that your technology services department has to put on every device. Okay, so do not use secure tester unless you're sure of this. If you have students that might be taking it on an iPad, or they might be using a home device that you're not sure of the technology, I would not use secure tester at this point in time. display the test on Take a Test, you can. My favorite thing down here is the track and display student response times. You can also restrict test access to specific days and times. So let's say, for example, as part of your remote learning, you have a block of time on Tuesdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Well, you can lock this test down to only be available during that time. Just make sure you're very clear about communicating this. Because students might be working in the evenings when they have parent support or more access to more devices, and so if you restrict test access to during the school day, they may not have time to do it. So just a note about there. But I love this track and display student response times because it gives me a per question time on a test, right? So I can see in my item analysis how long a student took on each question. And that's really nice trend to detect, if students are struggling. Also, if they have access to maybe outside resources that they shouldn't have during a test, that can also be apparent with track and display student response times because they would have a very quick response time and a very high score. So those are some a little security feature there that you can put in. You can also make it a time test, and the rest of them are pretty self-sufficient, explanatory. So I'm going to click Save and Publish, and it's going to give me a warning message because I'm on the training site. I don't have classes connected through PowerSchool, but you are going to make sure that you have assigned the test to your PowerSchool sections because you're going to want to make sure all of your grades and all of your reporting shows up as all right, so once you've published, it's going to go ahead and publish the test to TestNav. This is where the text-to-speech is being generated. So remember, under those test settings, I went ahead and enabled those accommodations. All right, so here is where it's being generated. It takes anywhere from 5 minutes to maybe 15 if you have a lot of questions on your test. And then one last thing that I always recommend is that you preview the test as a student, which you can't do, it's grayed out right now, while the text-to-speech is being generated. But I always recommend previewing the test as a student, just to make sure all the questions appear correctly, everything works correctly. If you're in a remote setting and maybe you have some students who are going to be offline and not have access to internet, you can download a student test booklet as a PDF or as a Word document and print that and give that to the student, or post it in your Google Classroom or something like that nature. You could do that so that way there's access to the test outside of Schoolnet if needed. Just keep in mind you would have to grade those tests that are submitted, through a PDF system, but that is definitely an option for those with connectivity issues. All right, so I can go ahead and preview this test as a student, so I'm just going to do that real quick to model for you the appropriate tasks. All right, so we're going to start the test now. And we're just going to go through. Notice I have a calculate score button. That is only for me as the teacher since I'm previewing this test. Your students won't see that, but you can click on answer and answer choice and calculate the score. If you are new to using Schoolnet and this is the first time your students are using Schoolnet, I highly encourage you to make a little sample test with some items and actually create like a screencast walking your students through how to use Schoolnet, how to use TestNav, even high schoolers, right? Because if they've never used it before, they don't know about these features. Like you can cross out answer choices as you're working. You can go in here, and since there's a notepad feature, and then since I enabled comments, there's this little comment cloud on every question where a student can write a comment and I will see it as a teacher when I look at the student's responses. All right, so this question is confusing. All right. You'll notice over here too, there's a little play icon. This is for the text-to-speech. And you'll notice that it's going through.
Include a risk assessment of a small engine repair shop.
Right? So you can preview that, make sure it's reading the questions correctly. Once you've gone through all of your questions and making sure everything loads correctly, especially if there's like graphs or pictures on your test, you just want to give it a quick glance to make sure everything looks clear. This test looks fine. I'm going to click on that X to close out. and this test is scheduled and ready to be given to my students, right? So I just give them this passcode and they log into Schoolnet, click on the take a test box, enter this passcode, they're taking the test. All right, so I hope that was a helpful video to help you understand how you can find your CTE items and create a CTE specific test. Please feel free to reach out to your public school unit Schoolnet contact. Everyone has a Schoolnet lead in each PSU, and that person can help you with any specific questions you have or if there's any particular problems that you're facing. All right, thank you.